By the way, that those people who claim that the shroud is 2,000 years old obviously have a stake in all of this story. The medieval daters don't want it to go back beyond this date here in Western Europe. Okay? There's already a major problem, as you might now observe already from my theory, that Leonardo did it. And that is that it exists for certain in Lirey, because these dates are absolutely certain in locations, historically. It exists over a century before he's born. But I don't find that too much of a problem because Leonardo was very smart and maybe he had a time warp machine. Understand? And there were Episcopalian pilgrims here from Australia over a year ago, and they told me in 2007 they had seen 2 documentaries in Australia, both concluding that Leonardo da Vinci did it. So I was very happy to have the company, but wondering about infoethic. Because it's certain that it was there a century before he was born. You understand? Now, let's start over here. Besides the image of the man on the shroud, there are images of 2 coins reported and images of flowers which only grow here. Okay? In this area. The 2 coins, and also other things, a spearhead and a grass rope and other things. The coins were both minted by a fellow, you might have heard his name before, Pontius Pilate. And they were minted in the years 29 and between 29 and 32. Now, do you have any coins in your pocket from the last century? From the century before? So if you find coins, they're very important for dating archaeological discovery. But in a moving object, they're also important to locate it because your coins are going to be useless to you when you go back to England or Australia or wherever, right? United States, your shekels. If you have 2 Pilate coins from very close together, 29 and 32, then that's a huge statement. There's a study on that upstairs for more details if you're interested. That the flowers from only here are imaged on the cloth, and that's not just the pollen, which is a well-known study. The flower images are not so well known. We'll do more about it upstairs when we go up. Then up in Edessa there's the story of the cloth, which was very famous. Historically absolutely certain that it existed. It was called the Mandilion. Sometimes it's dubbed the cloth of Edessa. This cloth was the most coveted treasure of Christianity back then because they figured this was the true face of Jesus. You can imagine how they treasured it. And you can imagine then their heartache when Edessa fell to Muslim control and they wanted to recover it. And finally the Emperor Constantine VII of Constantinople sent down an army, gave back 200 Muslim prisoners, a camel load of gold, or maybe it was a donkey load, and he got the cloth to Constantinople. And it was taken, and we know the exact date that it came to Constantinople. It was on the 15th of August, 944, shortly before your great-grandmother was born. And then it was here for 260 years, and it was taken out every Friday for veneration of the people in its full size, and it was now called the Sindune, which is the Greek word in St. John's Gospel for the cloth that Joseph of Arimathea purchased or had for the burial of Jesus. Why did they change the name? Interesting detail. Now, it's here for 260 years until a very sad day for Christianity. What happened in 1204? The Fourth Crusade, rich businessmen from Venice, out for a buck, come down to take back the tomb, but because they had too much Irish whiskey on board, they wrecked Constantinople and really robbed its entire, looted its entire treasure in all the churches and all the buildings. It was a very rich city. It had gold on the streets, on some of the decorations on the streets. It was that rich. And they plundered the city. And at that point, the Sindune, the Mandilion, disappears. And the the grandson of the Emperor Theodore writes a letter to the Pope and says, "Give us back the Sindune now!" And what can the poor Pope do with the crusade out of control? What we do know is that the leader of the crusade, Otto de Roche, a Frenchman, had a great-granddaughter. No, a great-great-granddaughter. Many of you have grandchildren. Maybe some of your grandchildren are ready to have their own children. Not too far away, you know, and then it's one more generation. And his great-great-granddaughter was Jeanne de Vergey. And she gets married here, and guess what her dowry is? Shroud of Turin. And you know how much it was worth? Enough that her own granddaughter was able to sell it to the Dukes of Savoy, the kings of Italy, who controlled southern France at that time, for 2 castles. And castles didn't come without their cabbage garden. There are thousands of acres of hunting land. Okay? So the Savoys brought it to Chambéry, and I didn't explain about the holes. There are triangular holes there. They're very interesting, and I missed that now because they're up here. But they're all repeated, and they're all formed by one drop of burning something. Like if I get a cigarette and put a hole down through here, then every page will have the same kind of hole. If I cut it with a knife, then it would have a longer hole, right? So the shroud is folded, and you can recognize the patterns of the repeating holes, and that's where this fire happened in Chambéry. And then eventually the shroud was transferred to Turin, and after 530 years of Savoy ownership, it was handed over by Umberto II 25 years ago, to 1983, 25 years ago, to Pope John Paul II. Actually, he left it in his will, but the Pope didn't want to accept it in his name, so he accepted it in the name of the Church. So we all have a little thread of it now, you know. So we'll be sold for 2 castles again in the near future. Now, the next stage we're going to, I invite some of you who are smart to go up on the stairwell, and you can rest on La Scala de Gerusalemme. You can rest on this is our Scala, and you can rest there for an extra quarter shekel on the banister. And then the rest of you can sit on the luxurious marble steps, and we can pack in here, okay? You can't see them right now. Okay, so now I want you to put on your thinking caps. There's room for 3 or 4 more people here, especially if this concentrated lady moves out one step. Come up here because you can't see them down there. Come on up here.
Yeah, I'll come forward a bit, shall I? And they can see over my head.
Come up, you can't see there. You can't see there. Please, come in there. If you're not here to hear, you're here to see. Otherwise, you can stay at home and follow by television or by your radio. Okay, now, I want you to focus on this icon, which is an interesting date, because if you remember, the date of the transfer is here, so the icon is here. So it's a new period of consciousness of the shroud, of the Mendelian, and now called the Syndone when it's transferred to Constantinople. So I always ask the pilgrims to give me the 2 most evident reasons why this cloth could not possibly be the Shroud of Turin. Just by looking at it, and don't tell me the artistic details, just the major things that you can't see because they're so strong. What? Is 2 what? Too small. Excellent, give me 5. Second reason.
No burns.
No what?
No burn marks.
In the wrong position.
Those are details of the artist. Artistic liberty, creativity.
The head is in the middle.
Doesn't look like it, the head, no?
This lady was onto something here, but she didn't give me the complete answer.
What did she say?
Well, there's no corner missing, is that what you mean?
No, I thought you said
burn
something else.
marks.
The burn
No
marks.
burn
Bones.
marks.
The burn marks?
About burn marks. Sorry, I didn't know the word burn. No, because this would be the burn. Okay, burn happened 500 years ago.
Oh, okay.
There's no body.
No.
It's just a head.
Yeah. Yes.
Okay? But these 2 reasons don't hold up. Number 1, the shroud had 2 nicknames. I'm slipping my tongue here. The shroud, the Mendelian had 2 nicknames. It was, and the Syndone. It was called Acheropoetos, which meant made without human hand.
Right.
And that doesn't interest us now. But the second one does. Tetradiplon, which means it was a 4-fold. Now, if this is a 4-fold, we are free to open it up. So open it up 1, twice, 3 times. So it's a long cloth. Now it's imaginable that they could have a whole body on it. And they fold it up again. And they think that's Jesus. So are they going to show you his shins or his face? His face. And because the cloth is so long and such a treasure, they were taking care of it, so they wrapped it up, they folded it up. And they held it for centuries at the main gate of Edessa. And Granny is coming out and she says, "Hey Johnny, look up at Jesus' face." Everybody calls it Jesus' face. And that was its name. And that was the point of veneration. Okay? And so when it's transferred to Constantinople, it's still the point of veneration is the face. But now look how small it is. Aha. So they've opened it up. Interesting. And that's the length of a man from his head down to here, because you put that's from his butt up to here, then all this. You see? Now I have a homily here that was given by preacher Archdeacon Gregorius Referendarius. Write it down in case you need a name for a grandchild someday. He was the Archdeacon of Hagia Sophia, the main church in Constantinople, and he gave the most boring homily. It's all full of Byzantine wind. And there's a piece in Greek even in here in this text that I have. It was only rediscovered a few years ago. And it's amazing how things are coming to light, you know. But in this homily, he refers to the face, obviously. He's the main preacher on this day. And he refers to the face of the Mendelian, the Sindone, and he also speaks about the hole in the side with blood in it. So now we have a very strong indicator that the Mendelian was not just the face, even though it was always called the face and always referred to as the face. You understand? Yes. Very good. Now let's move to Budapest in Hungary. And here we have a page from a codex. A codex is a collection of loose things that are like stapled together in a nice medieval way. So all the pages belonged to the codex before the codex was made. They were put together. They pre-existed. So this date is absolutely certain for this codex. And it's very important for the Hungarians because this is the oldest sample of Hungarian writing in history of the Magyar language. So they have in their national library. But for us it's interesting for the pictorials. Now look here. What do you see here? Read this image. So you have three men and you have this body lying down and they're pouring something. So this is down here, the second half, you have an angel with wings, got his wings. And you got three women and they have a jar of something. And here you have an empty space. So it's an empty tomb, and there's the cloth according to the art historians. This oblong here, okay? I'm going to point out a few things. And actually, I forgot a second thing to point out to you, a second set of holes on the cloth. So, well, we can do that upstairs when we catch up upstairs. So, here we have 5 points to show you. First of all, you can see a naked Christ image. Even his buttocks are pronouncedly presented, which is not normal in Christian presentation of Christ, okay? Then we have the crossed arms, but how many fingers does he have? How many do you have? You're lucky. So, and then look down here. Here's the cloth. Now in the cloth you see this jagged edge here. And you can see this up here when we go upstairs in the next picture up here of the herringbone weave. It represents that according to the art historians. They're pretty certain about that. And actually you can see a pattern very like this in part of the weave. And then you see these 4 holes, 1, 2, 3, 4. And I forgot to point these out to you. These are not repeated as frequently as the triangular holes, and they're nicknamed poker holes. We'll show them to you upstairs when we go upstairs and see the full version. And they're here. So the art historians tell us, here we have 5 unique things, all together in one document, that are also all present on the shroud. Therefore, they claim, as art historians, scientifically speaking, that this image depends on the shroud, and therefore dates the shroud that it had to be important before this date. Therefore contradicting the original carbon-14 dating, but since last Easter this is not so important, since National Geographic and Los Angeles Times and many other publications have followed suit on BBC's documentaries in Easter. Okay? That's enough for here. Let's move up to the next step. Okay? There's some people back there that can't see yet. Mary, did you see this up here? This lady down there can't see anything with this nice scarf. Can you come up here, lady? There's room for everybody, just get organized. So here you see the herringbone weave, and here actually is the piece where you see very closely represented with the image there from the Pre-Codex. I only saw that after a year presenting this thing. I saw the connection, it was just marvelous. Now you can see the contrast between the herringbone weave pattern and the patches that the poor Clares, the Franciscan sisters, put on in Chambéry where it got burned. The triangular holes, okay? We'll get to those in a bit. Actually, if you just look behind you, you can see the triangular holes there. You can see them there. This is obviously very small reproduction, so it's hard to see her. Down here you can see them, okay? But we'll come back to that as we go upstairs. Now, the medieval daters said, no way, Jose, this herringbone weave is a very clear indicator that this could not be 2,000 years old. It's technologically too far advanced. Lovely prejudice.
Yeah.
Until a few years ago, they found herringbone weaved cloth in the caves in Hallein near Salzburg, the home of the Celts. And they're up to 800 years